The Han Dynasty. Was this the golden age of Chinese history? The Qin dynasty ended somewhat violently in 206 BC, but it was not replaced by the Han dynasty until 202 BC. So what happened in that intervening period of around 4 years? In 206 BC, the 18 states or 18 kingdoms was created by the military leader Xiang Yu after the sudden collapse of the Qin dynasty. The establishing and then abolishing of the 18 kingdoms marked a period of turbulence, also known as the Chu-Han Contention. While short-lived, the 18 kingdoms began when rebellion erupted to bring an end to the Qin Empire. Revolts erupted in the former state of Qi when Tian Rong conquered the cities of Jiaodong and Jibei to reinstate Qi. Xiang Yu was responsible for the deaths of Emperor Yi of Chu and King Cheng of Han, while Liu Bang of Han conquered the lands of the Three Qins, which saw the beginning of the Chu-Han Contention. Also known as the Chu-Han War, the Chu-Han Contention was a short period between the end of the Qin dynasty and the establishing of the Western Han dynasty. After the surrender of the final Qin ruler, Ziying, the former Qin Empire was divided by Xiang Yu into the 18 kingdoms, each being ruled by various rebel leaders. Civil war soon erupted, the most prominent of these being between the two most prominent powers, that of the Western Chu under the leadership of Xu Yang and Han under Liu Bang. The conflict ended in 202 BC with a victory for the Han at the Battle of Gaixia, which resulted in Xiang Yu choosing to take his own life after an unsuccessful last stand. The victorious Liu Bang proclaimed himself emperor of the newly established Western Han dynasty. Overview of the Han Dynasty. The Han Dynasty was an imperial dynasty of China from 202 BC until 220 AD, with the exception of a few years from 9 until 25 AD. It replaced the Qin dynasty and was subsequently replaced by the Three Kingdoms period in 220 AD. The dynasty's period of rule was interrupted by the Qin dynasty of 9 until 23 AD, and the dynasty is further divided into the earlier Western Han and the latter Eastern Han. The Han dynasty ruled for over 400 years in what is often considered a golden age in Chinese history, influencing the Chinese civilization's identity ever since. The vast majority of Chinese people today refer to themselves as being Han Chinese or Han people. The spoken language and written Chinese are both referred to as the Han language and Han characters. This was an age of economic prosperity, which witnessed a significant growth of the monetary economy. The coinage minted by the central government in 119 BC remained the standard coinage of China until the Tang dynasty of 618 to 907. There were significant advances in science and technology during the Han dynasty, including the introduction of papermaking, the nautical ship-steering rudder, the use of negative numbers in mathematics, and much more. It was also a time of conflict, most notably with the Xiang Yu, a nomadic group located along the eastern Eurasian steppe. The Han was defeated by the Xiang Yu in 200 BC. This prompted the Han to appease them with policies of marriage alliances as well as payments of tribute. Despite these measures, the Xiang Yu continued to raid the northern borders of the Han Empire. Under Emperor Wu in 133 BC, the Han policy changed when a series of military campaigns were conducted to quell these invasions. The Xiang Yu were eventually defeated after acceptance as a vassal state. the nomadic confederation finally fragmented. The victory over the Xiang Yu opened the Hershey Corridor and the inner Asian territory of the Tarim Basin, which ultimately led to the opening of a vast trade network which would later become known as the Silk Road. There were further conquests in the south and further expansions into the Korean peninsula. Problems began for the Han Dynasty long before it came to an end. From 92 AD, the palace eunuchs became increasingly more involved in the politics of the dynasty's royal court, which often resulted in violent power struggles between differing consort clans of the Empress and Empress Dowager. Imperial authority came under serious challenges from the large Taoist religious societies, including the instigation of revolts such as the Yellow Turban Rebellion and the Five Pecks of Rice Rebellion, which was also known as the Way of the Celestial Masters. Following the death of Emperor Ling, who ruled for 23 years until he died in 189 AD, the palace eunuchs were massacred by military officers, which enabled members of the aristocracy and military governors to then become warlords, thus eventually dividing the empire. The abrupt end of the Han Dynasty occurred in 220 AD when Zhao Pai, the king of Wei, usurped the throne from Emperor Xian. Western Han. After the fall of the Qin dynasty through a rebellion largely instigated by the two rebel leaders, Xiang Yu of Chu and Liu Bang of Han, the two then took to war between themselves to determine who would ultimately lead China forward. This led to 18 states or 18 kingdoms, with each claiming their allegiance to one or other of the two leaders as war took precedent once again in China. Although Xiang Yu was an effective commander in battle, he was defeated by Liu Bang at the Battle of Gaixia in what is today Anhui province. Liu Bang then assumed the title of emperor, adopting the name Emperor Gaozu, and ruled until his death in 195 BC. The new Han capital was built at Chang'an at what is today the city of Xi'an, the capital of Shaanxi province. The Western Han, which was also later known as the former Han, existed in the western third of the empire, while the eastern two-thirds were divided into 10 semi-autonomous kingdoms. To placate the prominent commanders from the War of Chu, some were selected as kings into those kingdoms under the direction of the emperor. By 196 BC, these kings had all been replaced by family members of the royal clan Liu, the only exception being the kingdom of Changsha. After several insurrections by Han kings, their loyalty to the emperor was questioned, the largest of these being the rebellion of the Seven States in 154 BC. The imperial court began a series of reforms limiting the power of these kingdoms. In 145 BC, the territories were divided into new commanderies that were placed under control of the central government. Kings were no longer able to appoint their own staff, a duty taken over by the imperial court. Kings were, however, able to retain a portion of taxes collected for their personal use, and the kingdoms remained throughout the remainder of the Han dynasty. Once peace was eventually achieved with the expulsion of Xiongnu in the lands to the north of China, the Han began expanding into Central Asia through peaceful means, setting up trade missions in what became the first steps into creating the Silk Road, eventually trading Roman goods such as glassware for those items such as silk from China. The first nationwide census in Chinese history took place in 2 AD. The Han population at that time was recorded as being 57,671,400 people, living in 12,366,470 households. Wang Mang, Civil War and Qin Dynasty. Wang Zhenjun was first Empress, Empress Dowager, then Grand Empress Dowager during the reigns of Emperors Yuan, Cheng, and Ai from 49 until 1 BC. During those years, a succession of her male relatives held the title of regent. Following the death of Emperor Ai in the year 1 BC, her nephew Wang Mang was appointed regent for Emperor Ping. Ping died just 7 years later in 6 AD, and his heir Liu Ying became emperor. Wang Mang was appointed to serve as acting emperor until the child reached adulthood, with Wang Mang promising to relinquish his control when Liu Ying came of age. Despite those promises and against protests and revolts from the nobility, Wang Mang claimed that the mandate from heaven called for the end of the Han dynasty and that it was to be replaced by a new dynasty, the Qin, headed by himself. Wang Mang initiated a series of reforms including outlawing slavery, nationalizing land, equal distribution between households, the introduction of a new currency which led to debasing the value of current coinage. All of his proposed reforms were unsuccessful through the opposition they provoked, and Wang's regime met its own downfall after massive floods of 3 AD and 11 AD, signs that the gods were not happy through the mandate of heaven. The Yellow River had received a gradual build-up of silt that raised its water level and overwhelmed the flood controls in place. Split into two branches, the river emptied into the sea to the north and south of the Shandong Peninsula. It was not until 70 AD that engineers were able to fully dam the newly created southern branch of the river. Thousands of peasant farmers were displaced by the flood. Many joined the bandit and rebel groups roaming the area. These groups, known as the Red Eyebrows, became too strong for Wang Mang's armies, and eventually the mob forced their way into the Weiyang Palace and killed Wang Mang. The Gongxi Emperor, a descendant of the 2nd century BC Emperor Jing, attempted to restore the Han dynasty from the capital Chang'an, but he was subsequently assassinated by the rebels and replaced by a puppet monarch, Liu Xiu, a distant cousin of Gengxi and known as Emperor Guangwu. Under his leadership, the Han Empire was restored after he distinguished himself at the Battle of Kunyang in 23 AD. The capital was moved to Luoyang in 25 AD. The leaders of the rebels were executed for treason as Guangwu waged war against other regional warlords that made claims to the title of emperor. But once those warlords were defeated, China was once again unified under the Han dynasty. The Eastern Han. Regarded as a continuation of the Western Han dynasty, the Eastern Han, which existed from 25 AD until 220 AD, was established by Liu Xiu in the capital of Luoyang in what is today Henan province. The dynasty was ruled by 12 emperors during its reign of 195 years. With the defeat of Wang Mang, Emperor Guangwu had completed the revision of all the policies set by his predecessor within the first 2 years of his rule. Following this was a period considered the most prosperous of the Han dynasty, with the dynasty regaining its position of prosperity during the Han reigns emperors Guangwu, Ming, and Zhang. During this period, the Eastern Han's economical, scientific, and cultural development surpassed that of the Western Han. After this period of prosperity, the latter emperors were generally children, too young to control the empire, and the real power was controlled by distant relatives and eunuchs. This often led to corruption, which resulted in rebellions, particularly led by farmers against the ruling classes. In 184 AD, one such rebellion, the Yellow Turbans Uprising, was launched by Zhang Jiao, a farmer from Hebei who protested against the tyrannical power of the eunuchs. Although Zhang Jiao became ill and died in 184 AD, his protests continued for another 2 decades and ultimately led to the downfall of the Han Empire. Overreaching their power, the eunuchs put the royal court into a state of chaos. During the reign of its last emperor, Emperor Xiang, he was not in overall control. That role was taken by a treacherous court official named Dong Zhuo. One of the rebellions was successful, and a minor warlord named Cao seized power, and the emperor was forced to relinquish his role, bringing about the end to the Han dynasty. The end of the Han dynasty. 2 of the most powerful revolts of the time were the Yellow Turban Rebellion and the 5 Pecks of Rice Rebellion, which was also known as the Way of the Celestial Masters, and controlled mostly by hierarchical Taoist religious societies. After initial uprisings in Hebei, the protests spread to what are now the provinces of Sichuan and Shanxi. The initial protests across 8 provinces were largely quelled within a year. However, smaller uprisings continued and were not fully quelled until the year 215 AD. The general-in-chief He Jin, the half-brother of the Empress He, plotted with Yuan Shao to overthrow the eunuchs by ordering several generals to march on the capital. There they demanded the execution of the eunuchs. This was granted by the Empress. The eunuchs, however, had her brother rescind the order and instead conspired to assassinate He Jin on September 22nd, 189. Yuan Shao then laid siege to the northern palace in Luoyang. Meanwhile, his brother Yuan Shu did likewise to the southern palace. 3 days after the death of He Jin, the walls of both palaces were breached and more than 2,000 eunuchs were slaughtered. In the year 191, Luoyang was razed to the ground by Yuan Shao, and the royal court relocated to Chang'an, with the capital changing again in 196 to Shechang. These turbulent years saw the leadership change hands regularly and culminated in Yuan Shao challenging Cao Cao for control of the emperor. Yuan Shao was defeated by him at the Battle of Guangdu in 200 AD. With Yuan Shao killed, his son Yuan Tan was executed in 205 AD over a family inheritance dispute, and his 2 brothers were killed 2 years later by Gongsun Kang, who sent their heads to Cao Cao. Cao Cao was himself defeated at the Battle of Red Cliffs in 208 AD, which resulted in China being divided into 3 spheres of influence. Cao Cao was able to stay in command of the north, Sun Quan dominated the south, and Liu Bang the west. Cao Cao died in March 220 AD. By December of the same year, Emperor Xian had relinquished the throne to formally end the Han dynasty. This move initiated an age of conflict between 3 states, Shaowei, Eastern Wu, and Chu-Han. Social classes of the Han dynasty. In the Han dynasty's hierarchical social order, the emperor was the one with overall control of the government and the people. However, in reality, this was often not the case. On numerous occasions, the emperor came to power as a minor and was ruled over by a regent such as the Empress Dowager or one of her male relatives. In the immediate rankings below the emperor were the kings of the same ruling family clan, the Liu. Below this, the remainder of society included nobles below the rank of kings, and all commoners, with the exception of slaves, belonged to one of the 20 ranks known as Gongchang. Education and philosophy during the Han dynasty. During the early years of the Western Han, the philosophical teachings of legalism, Taoism, and Confucianism were accepted into making decisions of state in addition to shaping the policies of its government. However, this changed under the leadership of Emperor Wu, who gave exclusive patronage to that of Confucianism. In 136 BC, the emperor abolished all academic chairs not concerned with the 5 classics, while encouraging nominees for office to obtain a Confucian education at the Imperial University he later set up in 124 BC. Differing from the original ideology created by Confucius, the Han philosophy during the reign of Emperor Wu was a creation of Dong Zhongshu. Dong was a scholar and minor official who elevated the Confucian ethical ideas of ritual, filial piety, and harmonious relationships. Dong's synthesis was of great interest to the emperor as it justified the imperial system of government within the natural order of the universe. The Imperial University created by Emperor Wu grew in importance as the student body increased to more than 30,000 by the end of the 2nd century AD. A Confucian-based system of education was available at commandery level schools, and private schools opened in small towns where teachers were able to earn respectable incomes from those tuition payments. Law and order under the Han. Notable Han scholars such as Jia Yi portrayed the Qin as being a brutal regime, yet the reality of archaeological evidence reveals that many of the statutes used in the Han Code of Law, which was compiled by Chancellor Xiao He, were in fact derived from Qin law. Under the Han, women were able for the first time to level criminal charges against men, often involving cases of physical abuse and murder, among others. Those found guilty were rarely imprisoned. Punishments were usually monetary fines, periods of hard labor, and the death penalty by beheading for the most serious offenses. In the early years of the Han dynasty, torturous punishments borrowed from the Qin Book of Law were adopted, though these were later used less often. Clothing of the Han dynasty. The types of clothing worn and the materials used to make those items varied greatly dependent upon social class. Afford clothes made from silk, including robes, skirts, socks, and mittens. Coats made of badger or fox fur, while duck plumes, leather pearls, and silk lining added to the comfort of those wealthy enough to afford such items. Peasants, on the other hand, commonly wore clothes made from hemp, wool, and ferret skins. Military of the Han. When the dynasty began, every male commoner upon the age of 23 would find himself liable for conscription into the military. This age limit was reduced to 20 following the reign of Emperor Zhao, who ruled from 87 to 74 BC. Upon conscription, soldiers underwent 1 year of training, followed by a 2nd year of service as non-professional soldiers. The year of training saw them selected for either the infantry, cavalry, or navy. Most of the conscription policy was abolished in 30 AD, although soldiers could be recalled following their completion of service, depending upon the political situation in times of conflict. They were required to complete in continuation training and maintain their skills to be combat ready. During the year of active service, soldiers would find themselves on the border, in a king's court, or in the capital as part of the force under the Minister of the Guards. There was also a small professional army permanently stationed close to the capital. During the Eastern Han, conscription could be avoided through the payment of a tax. The Eastern Han also favored the idea of a volunteer army. This comprised the Southern Army, Nanjun, while a Northern Army, or Beijing, consisted of 5 regiments, each containing thousands of soldiers. When the central authority collapsed from 189 AD, wealthy landowners, members of the aristocracy, and nobility, as well as regional military commanders, relied upon their own retainers to maintain their own personal armies. Currency used by Han. The Han dynasty inherited the Banliang system of coinage from the Qin. In the early days of the Han, Emperor Gaozhu closed the government mint and favored the introduction of privately minted coins. His widow abolished this policy in 186 BC. This was followed 4 years later by Liu Bang with the issue of a bronze coin much lighter in weight than previously used. This lighter version, however, created widespread inflation that continued until 175 BC, when Emperor Wen enabled private minters to manufacture coins weighing precisely 2.6 grams in weight. In 144 BC, Emperor Jing favored the introduction of government-controlled minting, as well as the introduction of a new coin. The banliang, in use since the Qin dynasty, was abandoned and replaced by the Wuzhu coin that weighed 3.2 grams in 119 BC. The Wuzhu coin became the standard coin used in China until the Tang dynasty of 618 to 907 AD, with the brief exception of Wang Mang's short-lived regime between the eras of Western Han and its Eastern replacement. Han Dynasty, Science and Technology. This was a unique period in the development of pre-modern Chinese science and technology, and comparable to that of the scientific and technological growth seen during the Song Dynasty of 960 to 1279 BC. The typical ancient Chinese writing materials were bronzewares, animal bones, and bamboo slips or wooden boards. By the emergence of the Han Dynasty, the major writing materials were tablets of clay, silk cloth, hemp paper, and scrolls of bamboo strips sewn together with hemp strings, and with hemp passed through drilled holes and secured with stamps of clay. The oldest known Chinese paper was constructed of hemp paper and has been dated to the 2nd century BC. Standardized papermaking was introduced by Kai Lun in 105 AD, and the oldest known surviving piece of paper that includes writing upon it was found in the ruins of a Han watchtower abandoned in 110 AD in Inner Mongolia. Metallurgy and agriculture. There is evidence to suggest blast furnaces used to convert raw iron ore into pig iron and then used in a furnace to produce cast iron were operational in China from 722 to 481 BC. The Han era improved on this by injecting excess oxygen into the process to create wrought iron and later steel. Bronze had been used in ancient China before the arrival of the Han dynasty, but the Han used both bronze and iron to improve the range of weaponry, culinary tools, carpenter's tools, and domestic items. A significant improvement in this era was through iron smelting techniques produced the manufacture of new agricultural tools. The iron seed drill, invented during the 2nd century BC, enabled farmers to plant crops accurately in rows instead of the previous imperfect method by hand. The heavy iron plough was another invention during the Han dynasty, which required one man to control it with 2 oxen pulling. The heavy moldboard iron plough had 3 ploughshares, a seed box full of drills, and a tool which turned down the soil and could cover around 45,730 square meters of land in a single day. The alternating field system was introduced by Xiao during the reign of Emperor Wu. The system switched the position of ridges and furrows between growing seasons. Once it was proven successful, the government encouraged all peasants to adopt this method of farming. Other methods included the use of sloping terrain for growing crops and paddy fields to cultivate rice. Structural and biotechnical engineering. The main building material during the Han dynasty was timber. It was used in the construction of palace halls, residential buildings, and halls. Because of the rapid decay in wood, the only remaining evidence from the Han dynasty architecture is some scattered ceramic roof tiles. The oldest surviving wooden structures in China are some wooden halls from the Tang dynasty some 4 to 7 centuries after the Han. There are, however, some Han dynasty relics that remain, principally structures such as brick tomb chambers, stone pillared gates, rammed city earth walls, and beacon towers constructed of brick. Examples of structures that survive to this day are two rammed-earth castles in Gansu province, the remains of rammed-earth walls that once protected the cities of Chang'an and Luoyang, along with the brick arches, ditches and ceramic water pipes of their drainage systems. There are a total of 29 stone pillar gates that survive from the Han Dynasty that form the entrances to walled enclosures at shrine and tomb locations. The most common type of home portrayed in Han culture is the courtyard house with ceramic architectural models of buildings found in Han Dynasty tombs, presumably to provide lodging for those departed on their way to the afterlife. These provide some of the best clues about lost wooden architecture of the period, as they are exact replica matches of evidence found at archaeological sites. More than 10 Han-era underground tombs have been found that include examples of archways, vaulted chambers and domed roofs. These underground vaults and domes did not require buttress supports, as they were held in place by earthen pits. From Han literature, it is known that wooden trestle beam bridges, arch bridges, simple versions of suspension bridges, as well as floating pontoon bridges existed in Han Dynasty China, although actual physical evidence is scarce, including a relief sculpture of an arch bridge located in Sichuan province. There is, however, strong evidence of underground working with mine shafts reaching depths of more than 100 meters or 330 feet. These mines were for the purpose of extracting metal ores. Mathematics. There are 3 Han mathematical books still in existence. They are the Book on Numbers and Computation, the Arithmetical Classic of the Gnomon and the Circular Paths of Heaven, and the 9 chapters on the mathematical art. Mathematical achievements during the Han era include the solving of problems using right-angled triangles, square roots, cube roots, and matrix methods, as well as finding more accurate approximations for pi. They were also noted for providing mathematical proof of the Pythagorean theorem, the use of decimal fractions, solving linear equations, continued fractions, as well as finding the roots of equations. Despite all these achievements, the greatest advance in mathematics was the first use in the world of negative numbers. The first use of the negative numbers appeared in the 9 chapters of the mathematical art as black counting rods, with positive numbers being represented by red counting rods. The first uses elsewhere of negative numbers include the Greek mathematician Diophantus about 275 AD, and in the 7th century AD in the South Asian Bakshali manuscript. Negative numbers did not generally appear in Europe until about the 16th century. Astronomy. The advances in mathematics were instrumental in drafting the astronomical calendar, a lunisolar calendar that used both the sun and the moon as time markers throughout the year. The Xian calendar was created during the 5th century BC, which measured the year as being 365.25 days in length. This was replaced in 104 BC by the Taichu calendar, which measured the year slightly differently. However, Emperor Zhang later reinstated the Xian calendar. Astronomers of the Han Dynasty compiled detailed records of comets that appeared in the night sky, including the appearance of what is now known as Halley's Comet in 12 BC. These astronomers also theorized that the universe was shaped like a sphere that surrounded the Earth, and that the Sun, Moon and planets were spherical and not disc-shaped. They also believed correctly that the Moon and planets were illuminated by sunlight, and that lunar eclipses occurred when the Earth obstructed sunlight to the Moon, and that solar eclipses were the opposite when the Moon obstructed sunlight to the Earth. Conclusion. The end of the Han Dynasty was not a single event and occurred from around 189 until 220 AD, which roughly coincided with the rule of the final emperor of the dynasty, Emperor Chu-Han. The dynasty was replaced by the Three Kingdoms era after the tumultuous effects of poor leadership and turmoil created by successive rebellions, including the Yellow Turban Rebellion of 184 to 205. That is all for this video. If you have enjoyed watching and it has shown you a little detail of life here in China, then your subscribing to my channel would mean a lot to me. Thank you for watching. Make sure you click on the link to the next video, and until the next time, goodbye for now.